Welcome, everyone, to our RSA broadcasting from Virtual Broadcast Alley. I'm, of course, Paul Asadorian, here with the fine folks from Fortinet. You can find out more by visiting securityweekly.com/Fortinet. I have here with me today Derek Manky. He's the Chief Security Insights and Global Threat Alliances at Fortinet's FortiGuard Labs. Derek, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
And Michael Daniel, the President and CEO of the Cyber Threat Alliance. Welcome, Michael.
Yep, thank you for having me.
Nice to have you both here. The topic for today is behind the scenes of the cyber fight, highlighting the defenders, which is, I think, a good break from, we talk a lot about attacks here on the Security Weekly network. So, what does talking about the good defender side, what does that really mean? What can we highlight from the defender side?
Yeah, so great question. It can easily be a complex answer, but I'll try to keep this as simple as possible. So to me, the good is anything that we can do to try to flatten the curve, right, when we're looking at the cybercrime pandemic as it really is, right? Especially if we look at the proliferation of ransomware that's happening and the lion's share of attacks, which is cybercrime. Anything we can do, and on the defender side, different defenders have different views of good, right? And quite frankly, every defender has a piece or a stake in that ecosystem. So it's, even going down to the end user and SMBs and organizations and consumers, having that education piece as an example of being able to hone and sharpen their skills on a daily basis, to be aware of new social engineering lures that are happening. That may seem like a small thing, but collectively, that's a big problem, right? If those skill sets aren't sharpened. So things we're doing in the industry, at Fortinet as an example, we have free education, information, and security awareness training. We have security certifications as an example too. That education piece, I think, is a big is an important thing. I just wanted to highlight. Beyond that, of course, it's everything we can definitely talk about today in terms of work that we've done, frameworks in the industry, technology pieces that we've built. There's the mitigation piece as well, making networks more resilient. And this is us as a security vendor, of course. The more resilient we can make networks, the more expensive it's going to be for cyber criminals to operate. That's a good thing, right? Because it forces them to start to shift tactics and go back to the drawing board. But we can't just stop there. Actually, a good defense is a good offense as well, right? There's certainly offensive measures in terms of takedowns and all these things for botnet operations and ransomware games we can talk about. But the other thing is that by doing these good, strong defensive tactics, it's also really disrupting the cyber criminal supply chain. They have their own supply chain on their end. And so from a good defender standpoint, right, doing these things ethically to be able to stack up the defense, really disrupt their business model. To me, that's collectively what the state of good is on our side.
Helps if I unmute my microphone. And Michael, so you have a long background in the government, and you're now leading the cyber threat analysis team. Did I say that? I said that right. Cyber threat alliance team, I should say. From your perspective, is there information sharing that we can do to kind of dovetail off what Derek was saying, or what's, from your view, how do we disrupt the attackers?
Well, sure. So what CTA does is it enables cybersecurity providers to share threat intelligence with each other in both an automated and a human-to-human fashion. And so the theory behind that is that, we've long emphasized information sharing in other industry verticals like financial services or healthcare or the energy sector. Well, the cybersecurity sector needs to be doing the same thing. And if it does that, if it actually works together to share threat intelligence and collaborates in the way that Derek was starting to highlight, then we actually can do a better job of taking the fight to the bad guys. And we can increase that scope, scale, and cadence of our disruption actions so that we have a longer term, more strategic impact on the adversaries. And ultimately, that's what CTA really is trying to enable. We're trying to enable our members to do a better job of protecting their customers and clients, but also taking that fight to the bad guys.
It sounds like it's interesting. In the course of my career, I've run across several different cyber criminals. And if you're just one person and you find one event, no one seems to pay attention. I mean, and this is, almost 20 years ago, that I found some of my first incidents. But if we can come together and there's multiple organizations seeing the same thing, we can share information with each other and share back to law enforcement. Is that kind of the strategy that you two both were highlighting in the beginning of the interview?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead, Derek.
So I think we both said yes at the same time because we agree with that. It's true. As a founding member of the CTA, I can tell you firsthand, it's been everything Michael said. Right, getting collectively together, it's a powerful thing. Right, on various fronts. There's getting together to share the information to increase our security presence. Right, the security stack worldwide. Again, that makes all of our sharing information on the attackers. That increases that mitigation piece, the resiliency piece. It makes it more expensive for cyber criminals to operate. So there's that, but there's also the collective voice, right? Things we're doing, sharing early trusted information through the Alliance, as an example, is a very powerful thing, so that no one's taken by surprise on our side when we start to release our reports. And if I look back with the CTA about 6 years ago now, right? One of the first projects we worked on was CryptoWall version 3. This was one ransomware threat, which was the prolific ransomware at the time. Again, it wasn't just one vendor getting together. We actually had a collective pool of researchers that got together, shared information, and exposed the elements of that particular ransomware group. And by doing so, it actually it hurt them, right? I mean, the next day we saw a ship. They tried to ship to CryptoWall version 4 model, and they just weren't as successful afterwards as they had been before. So just my point of view. Michael, I don't know what else you want to comment on.
No, I mean, I would say that that's exactly right. I mean, what we're trying to do is encourage those connections between the cybersecurity industry and governments, so that we're having government and the private sector work together to disrupt what the bad guys are doing, because you need both the public and the private sector to be working together on that. And I think we've shown that we can do that. You can see evidence in like the takedown of Emotet and that group's infrastructure earlier this year. But we need to be doing that like every week. And we need to be hitting one of those groups in that way, so that we can really have that kind of strategic impact on the adversary and really begin to reduce, frankly, the amount of money and the benefits that are flowing to being cyber criminals and making life much more difficult for the nation state actors.
Yeah, Michael, I love that. And I love the part where you say prevent them from making as much money. And the earlier in the campaign we can disrupt their activities, the less folks they'll be able to ransomware, and therefore not generate enough revenue. Hit them, where it counts, is disrupting their revenue flow, because ransomware, I mean, is top of mind on everyone today. I mean, it's certainly not a new thing, but it's just really ramped up. What are your thoughts on ransomware today and disrupting it, and also kind of making it so that people don't fall victim to it, but if they do, not paying the ransom, right? Because then we'll just keep that funding going to the attackers.
Yes. So what I would say is that ransomware has changed from being an economic nuisance. From 8 years ago, ransomware primarily affected individual computers, and the ransoms were in hundreds of dollars. Now, ransomware affects whole systems, whole companies, critical infrastructure, like we've seen with the Colonial Pipeline, hospitals, school systems, city governments, anything you can name. And now, effectively, it's a national security and public health and safety threat. And so when you think about it from those terms, that means that the tools that you're going to want to bring to bear against ransomware are now much broader. You have to raise it in its priority for both governments and the private sector to deal with. And I think that it's really, really important that we focus on disrupting that entire ransomware business model from beginning to end at every step of the way. And as you said, so starting from, can we ramp up protections inside companies so they're more resilient to ransomware attacks? How do we actually enable them to respond better to ransomware attacks so that they don't feel compelled to pay, so that they have alternatives to paying? How do we actually identify that ransomware business model and find all the places that we can put pressure on the ransomware gangs? I think one of them is actually in cryptocurrency areas, because cryptocurrency is the fuel that enables the ransomware epidemic to keep going. And we've got to figure out a way to bring some of the principles of anti-money laundering and know your customer and other things that are part of the regular financial services industry into the cryptocurrency world, so we can start to choke off some of those financial flows. But it's really going to take a full court press from all parts of government and all parts of the private sector to deal with this problem, because it is so big and it is so lucrative right now.
Derek, sorry, did you have comments on that front?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously agree with everything Michael says there. In addition to me, if we look at going back to the good, I fully agree. We need to do this almost on a weekly basis because the problem is so big, but we are making good strides in the industry. If you look at, there are a lot of pieces fueling this. Cryptocurrency platforms, certainly one of them, as Michael talked about, and the money laundering aspect. But another is the amount of players, right, in these organizations. It's not just, you had mentioned earlier, back 20 years ago, you're looking at one person or one incident, right? Now you have, it's not just handfuls, you can have 50 plus people in these organizations. And then you add the affiliates, right? And the affiliates are the ones that are in the middle, acting on a commission basis, up to 60% plus commission sometimes, and they make lucrative amounts of money as well. So, to me, looking at the good in terms of the disruption efforts, there was an indictment earlier this year with NetWalker, and this was actually going after an affiliate, because a lot of action typically goes after the actual organization itself. But this was sending another message, right, to the affiliates, which are a big problem, the distribution piece, saying, you're not going to get away with this either. And, just that one affiliate, I believe, had made close to $30 million just as an affiliate on commission. So that's a great message to be sending back to the industry. But again, it's only possible by collectively doing this and doing the public-private sector work that Michael was talking about.
I think there's, two different kinds of information sharing, and some is more effective than others. And I feel like there's a lot of organizations, especially here in the US, that don't put as much effort into cybersecurity to actually be able to take proactive actions. And I like the information sharing that's like, hey, by the way, like, you've got malware on your system, and like, here's the proof. When I worked at university, we would do this level of sharing. That was always the more actionable ones, like, oh, we got to drop everything, versus like, hey, there's a group that might be targeting you, and here's what they look like, and like, you have to go look. I feel like not every organization is really poised to go look all the time with cybersecurity experts. Is there a push to share information that's basically like, you're part of this attack? Are we seeing more of that level of information sharing?
Well, in fact, I would say that yes. I mean, part of my whole argument is that the sharing, like, just sort of generally sharing big streams of indicators or hashes and URLs and bad domain names and saying, here's a bunch of bad stuff, go figure out if you care about it. Like, that's not terribly useful or actionable to most organizations. So as you said, like, what we really need to be focused on is what is relevant to the organization that we're sharing it with. And what can they take action on? What do we want them to go do? Because we're not just sharing information for the sort of sake of saying, ooh, that's going to be really bad when that hits, right? We share it so that people can take action and better protect themselves or go remediate a problem that they already have. And so I think we need to get much more sophisticated in our thinking about information sharing and how we think about which organizations we want to be sharing what kind of information. Because information sharing takes work and it takes commitment. And as you say, a lot of organizations, that's difficult for them to sustain. So we really need to connect it to what their mission is or what their business is and make sure that the information that we're sharing is relevant to them and actionable. And that's where we really have to continue maturing this information sharing discussion.
Yeah, and to me, this is a great piece in the industry, a technology piece that we've actually worked on with the Cyber Threat Alliance as an example too. So with the Magellan platform, it's fully capable of describing not only the attacker, but real-time attacks that we're seeing. So, to me, this is the contextual piece. This is what I call the high-resolution model. As Michael was saying, if we just talk about the low-resolution model, which is, URLs, IPs, hashes, it only goes so far. But with the high-res model, now we can connect that. So we know that there's all these, not just malware on your system, but we've seen different types of TTPs, techniques, tactics, procedures, lateral movement, different tools associated with that. So that's what's happening at a high-resolution model for these organizations. Again, we can share information on that to know that, okay, what do we know about collectively, this pattern, right? Is it associated with a certain ransomware gang? And what are their, what's their modus operandi? So it's not just some invisible enemy. It's actually connecting the dots back to what we know with these adversarial playbooks. So it's more of the playbook discussion piece. But from a technology framework in the CTA, we've actually created a platform that can handle that verbose data and ensure that, which is great. And that can actually be integrated into, SIM solutions, security stacks, things like that too.
Yeah, I like that because it enables teams to get better at finding those affiliates that you mentioned previously that are in one capacity providing the access into the network, right? I totally envision, like we do on a pen test, when it's the good guys breaking into the other good guys' systems, you're sitting back going, okay, I'm going to deploy this and see if it phones home. And once the attackers, the cyber criminals have that, that's what they're selling. If we can detect them at that stage before it gets passed off to another group that's going to do ransomware, probably the worst example for an organization, I think that sets us up for success if we can constantly iterate on that process. I think that's a good goal to have. It sounds like you both are working towards achieving that goal.
Yes, and what we would say, and to build on what Derek was saying, is, and we want to do that part at automated speed, right? And we want to do that at scale. And that's what we've built inside the Cyber Threat Alliance to enable our members to do that, and to do that as fast as they can move. And so certainly we want those providers that can share and consume that kind of technical data at that kind of scale. We definitely want them to be engaged in that discussion and in that sharing activity, because that is how we'll achieve that cadence that we need.
Well, fantastic. Thank you, Michael and Derek, for coming on Security Weekly today. For folks that want to learn more, you can visit securityweekly.com/Fortinet, learn about their products and how to be more involved with the Cyber Threat Alliance. Thank you both.
Thank you.